Do we believe the Greens and the Victorian state government here that people don't want to see dams because of climate change? Or do people want to see the infrastructure they were promised built?
Well, I think one thing is clear from having spoken to a lot of these people myself, having taken to the streets along with many of the other Sky News reporters to ask people what they think, is that nearly everyone says that the government is not doing enough, that it is not a priority, clearly, for federal and state governments on this issue, even though the government has made quite a bit of noise about it. And certainly Scott Morrison and other senior ministers have been visiting drought-affected areas. They do speak about dams, they speak about pipelines, other infrastructure that they would like to see. And, you know, I think it's a good thing that even if we talk to people in the cities, most people seem very concerned about what's happening in country areas. They know that what's happening out in the country will affect them down the line anyway in terms of food production as well as other necessities that come from our farms. So let's take a listen to what people had to say when we asked them, well, the population of Australia has been growing remarkably over the past few decades, but the dam infrastructure hasn't kept up.
If I told you that our population has increased by a third in the past 30 years, but we haven't been building dams to match that, what would you say to the government?
I'd say get your act together. We've got to survive, and the cattle need to eat and drink, so yeah.
I'd ask them to listen to the statistics and, yeah, to build some more dams because we need them. We drove out to Toowoomba the other day and just driving through the Warwick and everywhere out there, it's very brown, so I think it's pretty dire.
I think it's a disgrace that we're 30 years behind and we've had 30 years to get ready. People don't realise how important it is, where the food comes from and where the food's got to come in the next 30 years. And to be 30 years behind like this, it has to stop now.
Yes, the government certainly, and that state and federal, need to build more dams because we are a dry country, and the reality is that we're getting more dry times. We're also getting some more very wet times, but things have changed.
And you have a farm yourself. What's it like on the farm at the moment?
We have a cattle property, and this is the worst it's been in the 100+ years the family has been there.
Do you think our government's doing enough to build dams?
No, definitely not. No. Especially, I'm from Queensland, and we certainly could do with plenty in Queensland, but there's always a big protest about it. So.
And so pull their finger out. I come from where the drought's hit at the most. I'm not from the city, I'm from the bush. And we're really copping it out there at the moment.
Where do you think drought ranks on the list of government priorities?
About 2.
Out of?
10. I don't think they care at all. They're too busy lining their pockets.
No, I don't think enough's been done. We're giving $150 million to the US over 5 years for NASA, and we're doing bugger all for the farmers out there that need assistance really bad.
So pretty unanimous there, Peter, in terms of wanting the government to do more to help struggling farmers out there. A couple of farmers you heard from as well who said that they really are doing it very tough and they don't think it ranks as a priority for the government.
I'm always fascinated in those Voxies to see the devil in the detail, to see how much people pick up, whether they just get the macro messages coming out of Canberra or state governments or whether they've got some ideas of their own. And it's really clear that people have strong opinions when it comes to issues of dams. I've got some socials I want to read. These came in on social media, predominantly my Facebook site. Ben says, build the Bradfield scheme. We've had metres and metres of rain up here in the north, and every time I see the millions of water not being utilised, it makes me sick. Charlie suggests, how about we look at how much money we're giving away and start spending it on our own infrastructure, get the water to where it's needed. And I really like Tony, who said he's got a message for the states. Get your damn act together and build more dams. Yeah, they're angry.
They certainly are angry, and people on the streets had lots of suggestions of their own. Peter, let's take a listen.
They probably need a better water management plan. I'm actually from down south and we've got problems on the Murray, how all the water's being dispersed in the wrong directions. So maybe a national plan coming from the federal government. I think they're all a bit confused between federal, state and local, who does what.
Oh, look, I don't know the details of policy, but they've obviously got to do more than they do. There's no doubt about that.
I guess government can't change the weather, but if we do get some rain, there has to be policies to preserve water.
I think the green tape needs to be removed. We need to look at what's holding us back, because there is plenty of water in this country.
Spend more, budget for more money for these droughts. They spend it on lots of other absolutely ludicrous things like fireworks. They can spend millions of dollars for fireworks in the middle of Sydney, but they can't spend money for the droughts in rural Queensland.
They should be bringing water down and building dams. There was an article in the paper about getting the army out there, clearing the existing dams out, and I think that really should be going on. So I'd like to see something really happen very, very quickly.
So a few different ideas there, and I heard that army idea mentioned a few times, of getting the army out to help build or expand on existing dams. But certainly a common theme as well was that the government was wasting money on various other things like foreign aid and even, as you heard, fireworks, when it really should be a priority to go to farmers.
Yeah, and let's be really clear. A man made a point there, not really sure about who was responsible for what, and the argy-bargy that goes on between states and the Commonwealth. I mean, the Commonwealth can put money in, and it certainly can have national infrastructure architecture, national plans for water, but it really does come down to states and local councils to approve the actual digging and the drenching and the placement of dams. And this is where I think the community needs to put pressure on state governments. I don't think we put enough interest in the media into what goes on at state governments, Caro. When I was growing up, you'd see 2 or 3 stories every night in the bulletin about the performance of state governments. We focus on them in campaigns, election campaigns, and then they sort of get on with their business. Whether they achieve anything much, there's not much introspection, there's not much holding them to account. So I think that's one of the important things on the water issue we all must do. Interestingly, as I said, the Prime Minister was in Sydney last night for this big speech, foreign affairs sort of type speech at the Lowy Institute. He then moved to Burnie in northern Tasmania today. He was at an agricultural show, the Burnie show. The first questions he really got were pertaining to the drought. So he can't go anywhere now without being really hit up on this issue. I want to play a grab from the Prime Minister, and you'll see what he said about drought.
The drought is the first call on the budget. It's our first priority in addressing those immediate fiscal needs. But longer term, it's also about investing in the necessary water infrastructure. It's not just dams, it's pipes, it's irrigation systems. It's ensuring that we're putting the plumbing in place. We can't make it rain, but we can ensure that we're building for the future and we're providing the financial assistance to support those communities to be able to make their way through these very drought-affected times.
I know the day after he became PM, he was elected, he went out into drought communities, Caro, but it seems to me he's really upped the tempo, which tells me they must be really feeling it in their internal polling, that communities are cranky about the drought, and the government, if it is doing enough or not, that's not the issue. It's the perception that they need to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, people across the country clearly feel that that needs to happen. But as you say, often the federal government has its hands tied. We heard from Susan Ley last week, who said that, she wants to see more dams being approved, but it was up to the state governments to allow those holes to be dug in the first place. And the Drought Minister, David Littleproud, was saying that it's illegal, basically, for the federal government to dig a single hole, that it needs to be the state governments coming to the table and helping this come through. But of course, we see so much green activism stopping these projects from going ahead to save some sort of, might be an endangered species or a bat or a frog that they're concerned about. And instead, we're letting so much water get away that could be perfectly useful and for farmers and others who desperately need it. So it can be a tragic situation.
You're spot on, it's the activism. And I tell you what, if there was a referendum tomorrow and Australians were asked, do you want the states to give up dam building and give it to the Commonwealth as a constitutional issue because you fear not enough is being done at state level, I know exactly where I think that referendum would end up. But we'll see. I don't think the issue is going to go away any soon. We're about to head into summer, and by all reports, we're told it will be hotter than ever. And this and bushfires, I think, will loom large in the nation's consciousness. Caro, thank you for that. That's terrific. I love Friday feedback, and I really appreciate you being with us tonight.
Thanks, Peter. My pleasure.